Hi there! I'll take one Warhammer Underworlds Harrowdeep, please. That'll be $60. But your website said $50. I drove straight over. Price went up. Do you know what? It's fine. Here's $60. It's $65 now. What? Look, fine. Here's another $20. That's $80. But it's only $70. That's okay. Just give me change then. Now it's $85. Hey everyone, my name is Discourse, and today we're going to talk about how prices just keep going up. Oh yes, Games Workshop and price increases. Is there a pairing any more classic? You have wine and cheese, fish and chips, and Games Workshop and price rises. And yet I'm still surprised and disappointed every single time. So let's dive into the latest price increase, talk about why it's so bad, and address a common response justifying these constant and irrepressible price increases. So the unfortunate GW price rise spectre was raised for me again, this time, when the price for the new Warhammer Underworlds box set Harrowdeep was announced earlier this month, and surprise surprise, it's substantially more expensive than the previous boxes. Who could have foreseen this? Well, you hardly need to have been touched by the warp, let's just put it that way. And I'm sure there's lots of people watching this video who don't play Warhammer Underworlds, but this price increase goes way beyond what we would normally expect to see from a GW price rise. And I think that this price rise is in particular egregious and short-sighted, but unfortunately seems to fit a very certain pattern. It's sort of like being mesmerized and continuing to read a manuscript, because surely the author couldn't have written just another line saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Surely not. Not another line. Not another one. And then Games Workshop come from around the corner swinging an axe. Jeez, I think the Games Workshop ecosystem is genuinely like being at the Overlook Hotel. Come play with us forever and ever. So first up we had Shadespire and Nightfall, and they both came out at $65 each, which wasn't that bad honestly, it's a pretty good price. But then we had Beastgrave that came out at $70. Okay, that's kind of weird. And then we had Dire Chasm at $75. So again, that's sort of weird. Does anyone notice a pattern here? Is there a pattern emerging here? I'll give you a second. Yeah, that's right. They keep going up in price by $5 every single time for no real reason. They just do it, and people just buy it apparently. And so we've got the new Warhammer Underworlds Harrowdeep box, and there's gonna be no prizes for guessing the price of this one. I mean, we all know what it is. We've seen the pattern, and it is, of course, what the? $95? What? So they increased the price, but the increase only increase. Am I losing my marbles here? So it's just way more money this time for some reason. I mean, I guess they weren't satisfied with pickpocketing. Now they just want to snatch the purse. Yeesh. So yes, even in the history of Warhammer Underworlds, this is a very substantial increase. But don't worry, the box comes with an extra 50 cards. Yep, not miniatures, just some extra cards, basically. And maybe it's just me, but I don't think that justifies an increase of almost 50% over the original box set. There's just no extra meat on these bones. But hey, at least we get something extra. Is that where we are now? Thanking them for having just something extra for a price increase? I mean, we normally don't get anything whenever GW up the price on the peasantry. And this price increase strikes me as particularly foolish when it comes to Warhammer Underworlds. So a quick caveat here, I'm not entirely familiar with Warhammer Underworlds as a system. I'm only vaguely aware of the systems, I haven't played it myself. However, I have spoken to plenty of people who do play it, and they've informed me that one of the things that attracted them to the game in the first place is the fact that it represents a relatively affordable way to play some iteration of a Warhammer product. In other words, one of Warhammer Underworld's unique selling points, USP, was that it was an entry point to hobbyist gamers who wanted to maybe get into Warhammer but couldn't afford one of the mainline systems. And yes, of course, it has its own systems, it's not a one-to-one with Age of Sigmar. And from what I understand, Warhammer Underworlds is more akin to a board game than just a pure miniatures game. And what that means is that we have to think about this price rise in the context of the board game marketplace. And $95 for what you get in this box is really out of whack with what competitors in that space are offering. Because don't get me wrong, I completely understand spending up to $95, $100, $120 on a big board game. For example, I own Gloomhaven. Jeez, this thing is heavy. This is what content looks like, GW. This is what $120 of content looks like. This thing is heavy. I actually have to put it down, 1 second. Oh, that thing is too big. It's too big. So $95 for what you get in Harrowdeep isn't very impressive at all when compared to competitors. I'm sorry to say, GW, but you don't own a monopoly on the board game market. You're gonna actually have to compete in that space. And going even further, board games tend to offer complete experiences. They are one and dones. They tend to be complete in the box. And if they do offer expansions, they tend to be expansions, big expansions that come with plenty of new additional content that justifies its own price. But that's not what Warhammer Underworlds is. It can't be in the Games Workshop business model, which is really revealing and should cause us to think again about how Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar get sold. And it's completely out of whack in a functional marketplace. So for Warhammer Underworlds, Games Workshop sell what are known as warbands, and they also sell additional card sets. So the game is well monetized beyond just the basic core set. There are plenty of $50 expansions, and the warbands went up from $30 to $40 at the beginning of this year. Yeah, exactly, during the time of unprecedented growth. I guess that's how they made all those dividends. Money printer on. So you have an expensive board game and an expensive, I don't really know what you would call them. I don't know what warbands are. They're not substantial enough to be an expansion pack. They're more like microtransactions. Yeah, so basically they're selling a lot of microtransactions for the game. So we have an expensive buy-in and nickel and dimed warbands. So, mobile game then. Awesome design philosophy. They cost $40, but all you get are 4 to 6 miniatures and a handful of cards. Yeah, it's hard for me to make a joke here. There's not a lot of value in this box, and there's nothing much more I can say. Oh, I suppose it's better value than the Black Templar box. I could say that much. That is depressing. Seriously, for reference, a board game like Catan is $25 for the core set. That's a pretty steep gap, and Catan is a really beloved board game. It's one of the biggest out there. So Warhammer Underworlds is pretty much dead on arrival in the board game space. This is a pity, because Games Workshop could have used Harrowdeep as a nice ambassador in an adjacent hobby space. Warhammer Underworlds could very easily act like a gateway to miniature wargaming as a whole, and it could advertise not only the Age of Sigmar IP, but also the joys of assembling and painting miniatures, something that not every board gamer has experienced. But rather than enter the board game market honestly and competently engage with their competitors, Games Workshop have instead opted for a different path, and have consequently priced themselves way too high to attract anyone new now. There is no way that someone who primarily plays board games and is therefore used to getting a lot of bang for their buck when it comes to $40 is going to pay anywhere near $40 for 4 or 5 miniatures and some cards. Or will spend $95 on something as small as Harrowdeep. The value proposition is just too low. Although, now that I think about it, maybe this is a little bit like those Nigerian prince scammers? You know, the ones they send out an email saying, "I've run out of money. Can you send me some cash and I'll pay you back in a very expensive lion?" Or something like that. Well, the funny thing about those scammers is that they purposefully misspell words in their emails, and therefore they lower their response rate. And the reason why they do this is to make sure that only those who respond to those emails are the ones that they perceive to be more vulnerable to the scam, and therefore easier to get taken in. I mean, if they've ignored all the red flags that are the numerous misspelled words, then they'll be more likely to believe the words of this Nigerian prince, and therefore more likely to send them money, and lots of it. And it sort of feels like Games Workshop are playing the same game here. Basically, they've released a box set at such low value that anyone who buys into this box will be way easier to buy into the other roster of monetization techniques that GW use to trick people into buying their other sets. And hell, if GW are lucky, maybe they'll even fall into the main Warhammer 40k pipeline. But I hasten to add here, anyone who buys into Warhammer Underworlds is not a sucker. These techniques are pretty sophisticated, stupid, and I fall for them too, all the time. We like what we like, and very often we'll find excuses to buy into systems and games and worlds and settings that we really enjoy and that we want to enjoy. But Games Workshop just have to keep pushing that monetization needle further and further to the extent it grows more and more intolerable. You're having to make even more excuses year on year to stay in the pipeline, and it's going to alienate people. And to be frank, Games Workshop do want a certain type of customer to play their games. If you're going to buy this box for $95, then GW can be broadly confident that you'll buy a box for $200 that only comes with 13 miniatures. You know, if those models are evocative enough for you. So all Games Workshop need to do is turn the dial to find those specific models. Now, a frequent response to criticisms of price rises is that you can buy these types of box sets from third-party retailers at a substantial discount. And that's very true. It's why I always recommend picking up games from the companies that I affiliate with. Links in the description. And it's not just because that supports the channel, it's because it's a really good deal for consumers. The prices are much cheaper. Supporting the channel is just a bonus. And it's generally better to support third-party retailers because we don't really want GW to have a monopoly on the distribution of their products as well. I don't really want to imagine the nightmare world that would lead to. It's just Britain in the 80s. Well, we all know what happened there. Look, I'm kidding. I know there were plenty of independents in the 80s, but it was a hellscape. And I also get that Games Workshop don't consider themselves a retailer either. In fact, they believe that they are simply a manufacturer. Although they also think that they run a model company, not a games company. So whatever you say, Games Workshop. And yeah, they have a lot of stores, so on the face of it, their claims to being a manufacturer doesn't really make much sense. But when you look at their sales numbers, it does start to. Because 55% of their sales are done in independent stores. So fair enough. But 20% of their sales are done online. And that's comparable to the sales completed by Games Workshop stores. But the online component is increasing in size and number. It's going up 1% year on year. And I imagine that with COVID, that is probably going to increase. It is becoming increasingly clear that more and more sales are being made directly with Games Workshop. And let's be honest, Games Workshop are hardly advertising other retail stores. It's obvious where they want you to buy their products, and that's directly from them at the recommended retail price. And this price increase is applied directly to products that is then sold to third-party independent stores. So the argument that third-party retail stores offer a discount and therefore a price rise isn't bad obfuscates the fact that this just can't go on forever, and it still impacts the marketplace and therefore consumers at the other end. Just because the pain of a price rise is alleviated by a third party dipping into their own margins doesn't let Games Workshop off the hook at all. We can still be annoyed at Games Workshop for increasing the price in the first place. The RRP is the recommended retail price. It's not written in the stars here. Games Workshop come up with this. They actively decide the new price point. They're not an ancient deity making decisions on a whim. Oh, Games Workshop have increased the price of the game again. It's often said in the same tone as someone explaining how their house was hit by a lightning bolt from Zeus. Yeah, what are you gonna do? It's exasperating to me because there's a logic to these price increases. Games Workshop are testing the market and they're looking to optimize the amount of profit that they can pull from this product. They know that savvy customers will buy from third-party retailers for a discount, and that is factored into how they price the boxes and how they've marketed this price increase as well. They have thrown a perfunctory smokescreen of 50 extra cards in order to justify a major price increase. And this has likely been done because of those $5 price increases I went over at the beginning of this video. Yeah, the market bore those price increases. Let's push it further. So when Games Workshop smell blood, they go for the kill. You give them an inch and they'll take a mile. $20 more this time, please. And besides, their own stores are where they seek to recruit the majority of new customers. And Warhammer Underworlds is the perfect type of game that a GW employee could sell to a prospective new player, who will then buy it at recommended retail price and therefore feel the brunt of any major price increase. Because aside from the price, it's a very easy sale. It's self-contained. in the sense that unlike Warhammer 40k, you get everything you need to play, and it appeals to a more casual, board gamey style of audience. So if you're a younger kid, your parent or guardian will understand the idea behind it. It's a very simple seal, which is not exactly true of the mainline GW products. Yeah, I mean, I can't be the only one who found it difficult to explain what Warhammer 40k and my Sisters of Battle army was to my parents. Hey mom and dad, this is my quasi-autonomous, non-governmental ecclesiarch army of women in bootplate that exists only because of a typo in an ancient legal text. Do you pass the spaghetti, please? I'm aware the lore has been retconned, I just really like that old origin myth, but GW employees can sell Warhammer Underworlds to parents pretty easily. It's a board game that you build yourself. Super easy seal. And then it's just as easy to upsell those parents or guardians on a few extra warbands. You know, what does little Timmy like? I bet he'll get a kick out of these beastmen. We're all laughing because nobody gives a fuck about beastmen. And they really should, because those savage satyrs are my bros. But yeah, you get it. There's a reason why Harrowdeep is coming out in time for the Christmas rush. And here's the point in the video where I would look into the reasons why this price has gone up. If you watched my video on the Star Wars Legion price increases, in that video we went into all sorts of stuff. We talked about the cost of shipping and discussed how the manufacturing process in China has been impacted by COVID. Because at least Asmodee had the decency to try and justify the price increases with reference to something, so I could get to grips with it and discuss whether the price rise was justified. But with Games Workshop, it's just a smile, a shrug, and a statement of, is for me. So the only real thing I can say is what I said earlier. I guess they're just trying to optimize their profits. And that's it, really. They want to find out what the maximum amount of money is that a maximum amount of people will spend. It's just an equation to them. Change a few variables, see what happens. But this does real harm to the game, because in all this business, the game itself is often forgotten. You know, until they remember that they can arbitrarily boost profits by releasing another version of the game at a presumably higher price point. And this idea of using new additions to boost profits seems to be encoded into the very DNA of Warhammer Underworlds. Because the game itself is sold within this season structure, which in a lot of ways resembles to me a live service video game. And in that context, this ever-increasing price becomes far more nefarious. And it makes this $20 increase seem even more brazen. And to me, it seems like this was the plan from the very get-go. Constantly creating more and more content at increasing prices. And even with this increase in bloat, GW still have the temerity to market Warhammer Underworlds as the ultimate competitive game. Presumably because they want players to have to constantly feel like they need to keep up with the releases in order to remain competitive. Well, it really does reveal a lot about the mainline games. And when I look at how this game was originally marketed and then how it looks now, it's a real disappointment, because Games Workshop missed an opportunity to sell Warhammer Underworlds as a tight, streamlined game with no bloat at all. And if we were to look at this purely from Games Workshop's perspective, so basically we've put on the glasses from They Live and we're loving it, this could have really been the opportunity to offer a refuge for those former Warhammer players who could no longer wanted to keep up with the bloat of the mainline systems. But even here, GW couldn't help themselves, and they squandered it. As always, Games Workshop are their own worst enemies. They had to just keep on building on the core of the game and then jack up the prices every time. Because they're never satisfied with some of your money, they always want all of it. And the funny thing is, they're missing out on lots of potential cash from real, true fans of the game, in favor of potentially making more off those who will stick around year after year as prices just continue to keep going up. And now the new Kill Team Challenge box has been announced for £105, €140 or $170. That exchange rate, jeez. I don't know what the Australian price is yet, but I'm going to guess it involves the sacrifice of your firstborn child. Now it is cheaper than the Octarius starter set, which came out at £125. But importantly, it only comes with 2 squads and very little terrain. So it doesn't come with any of the cards or with the movement thingamabobs. You know, the Kill Team essentials. God, they even have me adding that thing as value to the box now. Their plan worked. This is a price rise in all but name. Don't let anyone tell you differently. We're getting less plastic for more money. The Games Workshop live service model is truly in force now. This is a very sneaky style of price creep. The cost of a squad just went up. First Harrowdeep, now Kill Team. Who's next? Who even wants to stick around to find out? I think that sucks. And if you agree, please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/discoursminiatures where you can support the channel. And if you want to hear more about how GW trick players into buying their products regardless of price, you may want to check out my video here. That goes all into the sophisticated sales techniques Games Workshop use to exploit player psychology. Spooky! And until next time, bye bye!